Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean, with another episode for you. And we're going to have, for the first 43 minutes or so, talk about the Chicago Bears. And then at about 56 and a half minutes, we are going to start talking about the Blackhawks. And in between, we'll be talking about the Chicago Cubs. So we will cover NFL Draft, Chicago Bears, opening roster, or 25-man roster for the Cubs, and the Blackhawks coming down the stretch for the playoffs. All this and more on Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. First is the Rockford Ice Hogs. The next home game is Tuesday, April 7th versus the Milwaukee Admirals. Puck drops at 7 p.m. The Ice Hogs play the last of 12 games this season against their bordering rivals as the Admirals visit the BMO. It's another WXRX Dollar Day, and fans can enjoy hot dogs, sodas, and beers and companion tickets, all for $1. Only 90 minutes from the city limits and fun for the whole family. Get tickets and more at icehogs.com. The show is also brought to you by audible.com. Head over to audible.com/Swerski Sports and get one of these audiobooks absolutely free. Blood on the Horns, the long, strange ride of Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. Blood on the Horns details the infighting and conflict between Jordan, Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, Jerry Krause, and Jerry Reinsdorf. Or there's Turning the Black Sox White, the misunderstood Comiskey. It tells the full story of Comiskey's incredible life in the sports at the time, but also debunks the Black Sox controversy. Check out any one of these or 100,000 other titles for absolutely free by going to audible.com/Swerski Sports. So this is going to be a really quick episode. One, because it's the holiday weekend. I'm spending time with the fam. I've been busy with work, so I didn't get a lot of prep in. But also because the Bulls are winding down. There's really nothing new to say. It's the same old. Baseball is starting. Spring training is stale at this point. We're at opening weekend. So next weekend, I'll hope to have Gary on. Maybe we'll talk some White Sox. So I'm going to talk a little bit of Cubs opening day, a little bit of Blackhawks, but mostly Chicago Bears. So first, I want to start off with Chicago Bears, and I really want to say that I really wish, going forward, Roberto Garza nothing but the best. I know I've harped on him a lot and said a lot of things about how he should be gone, and I really meant it as a football player. It's a football decision. I don't want to say that, oh, Roberto Garza was a terrible person, get him out of here. That's not how I was looking at it. It's honestly a football decision, and he didn't play well last year and didn't really play that well the year before. It was a football decision. I really thought he should be gone from the Bears. They needed to upgrade, and maybe they can squeeze one serviceable year out of him. I mean, it's not like at the end of Olin Kreutz's career when he was just absolutely dreadful. This Roberto Garza at least is serviceable. He's just not a center you'll have on a winning team. But the Bears decided to part ways with him and let him know, and ended up signing Will Montgomery, who's another journeyman type of guy but he's younger and better than Garza. I still feel that this is going to be a position they'll need to upgrade, but it gives them the flexibility of not having to do so this year. And I'm going to also do some questions that have been posed and talk a little bit about some of the questions I've gotten from people. So one thing I want to mention is we had a listener that contacted us about our mock draft 2.0. He loved the draft, except his quote was, "Please no Shane Ray." I just I don't see it. Looks like McClellan the second for me. And that's fine. It's an opinion he had. I really think Shane Ray is a lot different than Shane McClellan. He's much better at getting the quarterback, faced better competition, much more athletic, much more powerful guy. I said I saw some Merriman in him, and he didn't agree with that, but I just want to say that Merriman was 6'4", ran a 4.64 in the 40 at the combine, 10.1 broad jump, 25 reps on the bench press in the 2005 draft combine. Shane Ray is 1 inch shorter. He ran a 4.5 in the 40. He did that at his pro day with a turf toe. So that's he thinks, or he says he can run a 4.4. So that's much faster. He did a 10 in the broad jump and 21 in the bench press. So it's a similar guy, just tenacious. I love Shane Ray, and I could see where other people aren't enamored with him. He's got some short arms. He's every one of these guys is a question mark. There's no surefire guy in the draft, and especially with there's a plethora of edge rushers in this draft that runs pretty deep as far as this position, but they've all got their flaws, and there's going to be some guys that are exceptional, and there's going to be some guys that just don't do well at all, just like every year. But I think Shane Ray's the real deal, and I see where people don't. So it's each his own. Neither one of us is a professional at this, and even if we were, professionals still have, at best, a 40% success rate at predicting these things. And again, like I said, it was a short week, so I didn't have time to finish looking at players in the guard centers in the draft, and I apologize about that. I will get better at this before the draft comes, because it's coming right on us. We're only a couple short weeks away. But let's just talk a little bit about Mock 3.0. As I said, every week going up into the draft, I'm going to do a new mock. And the way I do it is, it doesn't make sense to me predict what everybody else is going to do, what the other teams are going to do, because one, if I think, oh yeah, I want Leonard Williams, I'll finagle it every way to have Leonard Williams fall. And that's not reality. I don't want any control over other teams or have to predict what they're going to do or anything like that. So I use a mock simulator called firstpick.com, first-pick. Let them, they make the choices of other teams based on need, the rankings, and some other factors. And what I did is I chose four mock drafts, four-round mock drafts for the Bears. And then I kind of picked, there was some that were unrealistic just based on glitches, somebody choosing, I don't know, Shane Ray first overall and Marcus Mariota going 10th and Jameis Winston going 5th or something like that. It's just kind of ridiculous where it's not going to happen, even though it's in the realm of possibility. So I kind of throw those out and get a good weighted average. So my mock draft 3.0 is, with the number 7 pick, the Bears choose Amari Cooper, wide receiver out of Alabama. He's a top-notch wide receiver. I think Kevin White is better, but he seems to be flying up a lot of people's draft boards. So just hearing things and seeing some of the projections and scouts talk, and as we get closer to the draft, he's one of those guys that seems to be a fast riser, and he was a top 10 pick going forward. So I see somebody, especially like at Oakland, really love that guy's athleticism and choose him. So I don't see Kevin White being there, but I think Kevin White is the better pick. But Amari Cooper is still a solid guy. So with the Sam Acho signing and the Pernell McPhee signing, outside linebacker doesn't seem to be as big of a need as it was. I still think they're not above or beyond going with the best edge rusher available, but I really feel that they've at least patched the hole a little bit, and they're going to get better bang for their buck with a wide receiver. And they've also addressed the linebacker somewhat. What's that? So that just kind of leaves what's the glaring hole for the Chicago Bears, and that's wide receiver at this point. I know some of you are going to be like, Jay Cutler's a glaring hole. I see that, but you're not going to address him because Jameis Winston's really the quarterback in this class, and he's gone already. So what are your options? The only option that you can do is fill wide receiver. I think Amari Cooper is your first pick. Second round, defensive tackle out of Florida State, Eddie Goldman. They still need monsters in the middle. He falls a little bit, I think, and the Bears capitalize on that, on Eddie Goldman falling a little bit. They missed Danny Shelton in the first, who I don't see as a top 10 pick, but you're gonna be taking a guy way too early if you take him at number 7. You can get a better player at 7. But they get Eddie Goldman, and I think he's going to be a good fit to be that guy in the middle, that big 3-4 nose tackle. The third round, Josh Shaw, cornerback / free safety from USC. He's a good defensive back. He fills a need right away at corner, but I think he'll eventually fill in a need at safety. The depth at safety is still not great. The starters still are not fantastic. They're adequate at best. Antrell Roll he's a decent player, but he's not the same guy he was. And Ryan Mundy, he is not a starter on an NFL Super Bowl champion caliber team. But at least that's an adequate safety duo going forward in the season, especially after the last few seasons. But I think Josh Shaw could be... He's too good to bury on the roster as a depth guy, and I think he can fill right away in at like third or fourth cornerback, so a nickel or dime guy. And then fourth round, Donovan Smith, offensive tackle out of Penn State. He's a very, very solid tackle, I think, and with Will Montgomery replacing Roberto Garza, there's only one hole in the offensive line that's just still a glaring need. I think Smith plugs that hole really well, and he's right off the bat probably an upgrade over Jordan Mills of what Jordan Mills was last year. Maybe Jordan Mills turns that corner because this is his first full off season of being healthy, and maybe he makes that turn and gets better, but that's a big if. And if he doesn't, I mean, we talked about this with Lester from Windy City Gridiron multiple times, is that this might be a thing where when a guy has a whole offseason in the NFL, I mean, Jordan Mills came in a rookie, and then before his second season, he had the injury, so he couldn't have an offseason to prepare. So maybe this is the one where he turns the corner, and that's a possibility. But until they put the pads out there and go out there, we don't know. So that's why I say Donovan Smith, because I think he can come in there and be better than what Jordan Mills was last year at this time. And maybe Jordan Mills makes that corner, but if nothing else, it is competition at that position. And that's what you need to get better, is you need competition at all the positions, and a legitimate competition. It's one thing to say, well, we're going to go in there and have competition, but then you pencil certain players in at starter. Lance Briggs a starter, Jay Cutler starter, Forte a starter. There's no real competition, and at least with the new regime, they don't have loyalty to any of these players. They come in there, and it's going to be, we're going to win, and we're going to put the best guy out there. So let me just sum up what my 4 picks were that I got to this point. The first one, I had Dante Fowler first. I don't think he falls to the Bears, but I think the Bears would like it if he did. He could play a defensive end or outside linebacker in this team. I think he would be a really good player and add a lot of depth and ability to get to the quarterback. But I don't think he'll be there. That's why I didn't choose him as my mock 3.0 first rounder. Second round, I chose Carl Davis. He's another guy that some might say is a little bit of a reach with your second pick, but he fills that need at defensive end where you're thin at depth. They've got Jarvis Jenkins, who's a question mark, and they've got Ray McDonald, who is still a question mark, even though he's got the ability to be really good. You don't have a lot of depth at that position. So I think Carl Davis could step right in. Even though he's listed as a defensive end, I think he could fit that hole as a 3-4 defensive end very well. Third, I have Josh Shaw. Fourth, I have Ben Koyasek, the tight end from Notre Dame, who's be a steal in the fourth round, but I think he's going to fall in the fourth round. He'll give the Bears that depth at tight end that they're sort of lacking. The second one was Dante Fowler again in the first. Dorial Green Beckham, the Mercurial wide receiver from Mizzou at wide receiver, who I think would fill a need, and he would be an absolute steal in the second round. Third round, Reese Dismukes, the center out of Auburn, who this one was a rough one because I did this the day of the Roberto Garza cutting and signing of Will Montgomery. And I thought, do I take Reese Dismukes in the third round? And then I fell back to my philosophy of best player available rather than trying to fill a need. And Reese Dismukes was far and away the best player at that position. Why wouldn't I take him? If he steps up and beats out Will Montgomery, then your line is that much better. And the better your offensive line, the better your offense goes. So, and if he doesn't win out, then you redshirt him for a year and he starts next year. He's a solid center, and I think he's a steal in the third round. You got to go for him. And then fourth was Donovan Smith. The third mock, Amari Cooper in the first, Eddie Goldman in the second, Josh Shaw in the third, and Lorenzo Malden, the 3-4, the edge rusher, let's just call him edge rusher from Louisville. He's a guy who I think in the fourth round he's a good fit there. And in that draft, I didn't pick an edge rusher, and I still think the Bears need quality edge rushers. And then the fourth and final mock was Kevin White in the first, who, again, I don't see him lasting that long. Jake Fisher, the offensive tackle from Oregon. In the third round, this was an interesting one, is Devin Funchess from Michigan, who played wide receiver at Michigan, but I think he's going to be a tight end in the NFL. If he's a wide receiver, I don't pick him because I feel he is basically the same type of wide receiver as Alshon Jeffrey, where he's a little bit bigger of a guy, and I think you need somebody to complement that rather than have two of the same guy. I think it makes your offense more dynamic if you can have two complementary guys. But I feel like he's going to fill out and be a good tight end in this league. And if he projects as a tight end and does well as a tight end with his skill ability, I think that you would have a really dynamic offense if you can put him in there and put a 2 tight end package in. That's going to make it difficult for teams to cover you. So that's going to be it for the draft. I've got some Bears mailbag type questions. And again, if you have any questions or concerns about my draft, or you have questions about the Bears, definitely just write in. Or as the listener did, he tweeted at me. So it's at Swerski Sports. I definitely answer every question you send to me right then and there, and then I'll talk about it on the air. And I know a lot of you guys are shy, but if you want to come on the air and actually say it too, let me know. You're more than willing to come on. This is a by the fans for the fans show. It's not just me yapping to you. It's I really want your input as well. Question for the Bears is, Will Sutton was a 3 technique for the 4-3 defense, and that's really where you wanted him to be. Where does he fit in this new Bears 3-4 defense? That's a really good question. That's one I can't answer right now. He really is a good fit for the 3-4. I mean, the 4-3 as a 3 technique. That's where I think he would be his bread and butter in the NFL. And had the Bears' new regime been there last year, I don't think they would have picked Will Sutton. But now that you have him and he's under a rookie contract, and he's not a bad player. I mean, he had a quiet year last year, but a rookie year in the mid-round draft pick. He did about what you expect. But let's put this into a framework of who Will Sutton is. He was the Pac-10 or Pac-12 defensive player of the year twice. So the guy can play. He had a quiet year last year, but he's also, even though he was quick and he was meant to be that guy that was a one gap get to the quarterback, he's 6'1", 320 pounds. So he's a big boy. I don't see him as being a two gap, a nose tackle for the 3-4 system, but could he be that guy that's a 3-4 defensive end? That's going to be the $64,000 question going into camp. I think that's going to be the way he makes this team, is if he can't fit in as a defensive end, he's going to be traded or cut, which is a shame because I think he's going to be decent. I had a high grade on him going into the draft, and I still feel that he's got the talent to be on there. I still think he's better than Ego Ferguson, but we'll see if he'll fit in this new system. So to that question, I think right now it's a big unknown, and I have a feeling that John Fox and Ryan Pace probably feel the same way, that they're going to put him in at defensive end, and if he's not able to play that position, he's not going to be on this team because I don't think he can be a nose tackle. The other question is, regarding some of my mock drafts, I have put a lot of emphasis on an edge rusher. So the question is, do the Bears have the room to take another edge rusher? And that gets into a philosophical type question as far as football goes. If we say, well, we've got a lot of guys at that position already, you've got Pernell McPhee, who you just signed, Sam Acho, you've got Lamar Houston, you've got Willie Young, you've got Jared Allen, you've got David Bass. And you're going to say, well, I have all these guys already at this position. Why would you draft somebody else at that position? And then it just goes back to the point I make, is you draft the best player available. It's one thing to have a bunch of guys at a position. It's another thing to have a guy who you have to absolutely plan against if you're the opposing offensive coordinator. You played against Julius Peppers in his prime. He was a lot different than having 6 other defensive ends. Is one Julius Peppers better than 6 other defensive ends because he was special. There's a lot of high quality edge rushers in this draft, and you have to ask yourself, is who's the best player that we see at the number 7 pick? And I think it's at who's going to be available for you. Your best option is either one of the 2 top wide receivers, Amari Cooper, Kevin White, or one of the edge rushers, who I think Shane Ray is the best of what'll be available. So if you think he's going to be special and he's going to grade a lot higher than somebody, maybe like another position that you feel you need, why wouldn't you take that? Why wouldn't you have a special guy? Because if you have to get rid of a David Bass or a Willie Young, but you can replace him with somebody you feel can be a Pro Bowler, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, would you have gotten rid of Richard Dent in 85, and replaced, kept him to replace somebody else? Of course, you have to have somebody that's in there that's a guy who can get to the quarterback. It's proven time and time again that as the Chicago Bears, if you don't get to Aaron Rodgers, you don't get to Matt Stafford, they're going to beat you bad, and they're going to go for big plays. So what you need to do is get to the quarterback. Make it uncomfortable in that pocket. Even if he has time to throw the ball, make him throw from the run. And you want the best available guy to do that. So if you feel at number 7, the best player available is an edge rusher, you take that edge rusher and you either get rid of people that are where there's too many spots, or you find another spot for those. Maybe you move Lamar Houston into defensive end. I think that's the better spot for him anyway. Let him get his playing weight a little bit back up, closer to when he came into the league, and put him at defensive end. And then you have a less of a rotation, and you can get these guys more fresh, and you're still putting a hell of a pass rusher out there. So I still think that no matter who you have at a position, if that person isn't the best player available at your position, then you upgrade. If you have a Tom Brady at quarterback, that's not a good one because he's at the end of his career. You have Andrew Luck as your quarterback. You have, you have a Luke Kuechly as your middle linebacker. You've got somebody who's still not even in the prime of their career, that's still ascending, and they're the top of their game. Then you go, all right, well, I don't draft that position. But look at teams like the Indianapolis Colts had Peyton Manning. They got rid of Peyton Manning to get Andrew Luck, because even though Peyton Manning's still playing at a high level, Andrew Luck is the future, and you want to constantly be on the rise or at your peak rather than on the downfall. So if you don't have a guy who's in his prime and one of the best players at his position, you can always be better. You can always be better. He may be a fan favorite, but if he's not one of the top couple of guys in the league, and even if he is one of the top couple guys in the league, but if he's older on the last legs, like when Brian Urlacher was still on the team, you knew he was almost done for. So if you would have drafted a middle linebacker while he was still there, that's fine. If he's a stud linebacker, is you find a way to get both those guys in the field, or you get rid of the fan favorite because he's past his prime. You always want to get a better player at that position. So if you have an edge rusher who's the best, I'm fine getting rid of David Bass. I'm fine getting rid of Willie Young, because you're still going to improve. What all that means is having a lot of players at that position is if you feel that you can't decide who you like better, one of the defensive ends, edge rushers, or a wide receiver, and you have them graded about the same, that's when you go, all right, well, we've got a lot of depth at this position. It's probably better for us to choose the wide receiver because they're same grade and we have a better need for it. So it has to be in that calculation of, but mostly it has to be who's the best player available. And I think the best way to look at that is you grade several guys right in that same wing. So you have the 7th pick. You look at the guys who you've got rated 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. That window right there. And then you say, all right, well, is anybody graded that much higher than somebody else? Because say it's a really weak draft class and you've got one guy who's graded out very, very high that you think he can be a Pro Bowler, and then the next best guy is terrible. Of course, it makes the choice easy. But if you have a draft that's fairly deep, or you're early on in the draft, you're probably going to have several guys who are graded out similarly. So that's when you start introducing what position do we have the biggest need for, and then introduce that. So if you're the Bears, the only decision that having a lot of edge rushers and outside linebackers on your team should go is if you have a guy, either Dante Fowler or Shane Ray or Vic Beasley, whoever, and you have them graded about the same as Kevin White and Amari Cooper, and then you make that decision and say, all right, well, I have them graded the same. I think they're going to be equally as good. Who's more valuable for us at this time? And that would be a wide receiver. Do I think the Bears are going to trade down in the first round? Because the question asker, he thinks the Bears can need the multiple picks from making a trade. And you're right. In an ideal world, you could trade back a few spots, still get a really quality pick, and you move down from 7 to 10, 12, somewhere around there. You pick up a mid-round pick, and you still get the guy you want. But the question comes in is there another team to trade? It's easy to say, well, make a trade back, and get more picks. But if nobody wants to trade with you, and there's always going to be somebody that's willing to go up, but if they're not willing to give up anything for it, I mean, if you're at number 7 and the Eagles are like, well, we want to come up from 20 to 7, and we'll give you a 7th round draft pick next year plus our 20th pick, who cares? It's not a worthwhile trade. Why would you lose 13 draft positions in the first round to gain a 7th rounder next year? And that's just a hypothetical, but you have to get value in that trade. You have to take a look if you have somebody that's willing to trade with you and say, is this trade worthwhile? Am I going to benefit, or why am I going to help another team out for no reason? Maybe the guy I really want's gone. So if you're the Bears, sure, there's a lot of guys that you can get that are quality guys. And if, say, Marcus Mariota falls and the Eagles do want to come up, and I don't even know what position or the Eagles have after all their trades this offseason, what they have left. But let's say the Eagles are like, we'll give you our 2nd round draft pick and our 1st round draft pick to move up. Then you have to ask yourself, well, do we think a guy that we really want will be there at 20? If so, is it worth getting a late round 2nd pick? So the first question is, do you have somebody that you can trade with to get good value? 2, is it good value, the offer you get? And 3, are you going to lose out on the guy you really want in order to get more draft picks? Those are things you have to ask. So are the Bears considering trading down? I'm sure they are. They would be silly to be like, nope. Unless you're a team that has the first pick, you're listening. And even if you have the first pick, you're probably listening. But you go in there and you listen, and nobody goes, can I trade 1st round picks with you before the draft for the most part? It's when you're on the clock. That's when teams are calling you to make trades because they see how the board is moving, how teams are evaluating guys. And that's what you're looking at. If you're the Bears and somebody calls you on a trade, of course you're going to listen. But are you going to make that trade? That depends on how badly the Bears want to move and how motivated the team that wants to move up is. So are the Bears listening? I'm sure they will be. Are they going to make a move? I doubt it, unless there's something that's just really going to knock their socks off. And one of the few ways I see that is if Marcus Mariota falls, I think there's going to be teams that are looking for quarterbacks, and this is a very slim quarterback class. If he falls, I think somebody might make the Bears a wow offer that they'll take. Other than that, I don't think they'll actually make them. So another question is, will Ego Ferguson play nose tackle or defensive end in the 3-4? And the way that it's sounding to me is he and Jeremiah Ratliff are going to be the nose tackles. Could he play the defensive end position? I guess so. I don't think he would be very good at it. I think he's going to fit in as a nose tackle, and that's going to be about it. I don't see much else use for him, but maybe in a pinch you have to put him at defensive end. That's kind of where I see him. Another question is, the Bears for another year didn't get a compensatory pick, and compensatory picks are given by the NFL based on how many players you go out and get in free agency versus how many you lose. And the Bears are usually buyers rather than losing people because they have not been good. So it's kind of funny. It's the compensatory picks more often than not reward the good teams and not the bad teams. So the Bears go out and buy a lot of players, and they don't lose a lot of players in free agency because they're not good. But are the compensatory picks good? I mean, it's always better to have picks. The more picks you have, the high percent you have to hit on them. So if you get 8 picks and you hit 50% of them, you've got 4 starters. But if you get only 4 picks and you need 4 starters, you got to hit it at 100%. You can't be wrong on anything. So more picks gives you a better odds of being able to get a starter. And then another thing to think about is here's some players that were picked as compensatory picks over the years. And it's not saying that every player is this guy, but it kind of answers the question of are they valuable? Tom Brady, Larry Allen, Hines Ward, Brian Dawkins, Marcus Colston, Pierre Garçon. Those were all guys that were picked as compensatory picks. There's a lot of guys that were flops and busts because usually the compensatory picks are later picks. But the more picks you have, the more gooder. And I know that's not a real word, but that's what it is, and you know what I'm talking about. Will Charles Tillman be back? No, he will not. He is going to, I have a feeling he's going to sign with the Bears and retire. I think he's on the last legs of any chance of signing. He's going to be a guy that's definitely not going to be signed before the draft. I think teams, the only way he has a shot is a team goes into the draft, doesn't get a player they want, sees what they have. Because what happens is you go in through the first initial phase of free agency, which is the high dollar players, the top names. They sign right away. Then you go through these guys that are the next mode of guys, who's usually the lower dollar amount, maybe 1-year deals. Then you have your draft and then your rookie free agents that you sign. And then after that, you sort of sit down and say, all right, what holes do we still have? Where do we see what we need? And then you see aging veterans and guys that are on the fringe of the NFL. They'll sign 1-year deals, minimum deals. And that's, if Charles Tillman is to sign anywhere, that's where it's going to be. So the team evaluates what they have, what they need after the draft, and picks him up. And that doesn't even guarantee that he makes a roster. But honestly, if you're Charles Tillman, why are you going to play 1 more year for a veteran minimum? It's, you know, you probably don't need the money. And why not just retire, sign a day contract with the Bears, and retire a Chicago Bear and go on like that? I think Charles Tillman is done. And I think signing Alan Ball was the stake. He was the nail in the coffin, the stake in the heart. And, I'll miss Charles Tillman. I loved him, but we haven't seen him on the field in several years. So it's not going to be a news site to not have him there. The Saints are moving everybody, it seems like. Could Kenny Vaccaro be moved from the Saints? Sure. Would the Bears consider him? Probably not, just because he's a high-priced guy. You're going to have to trade for him. You have to give up draft picks. You have to pay him a lot of money. I just don't see it. I think they're going to go with what they go with. And then that's going to sort of be it. But as far as the Bears, where do they go next in free agency? I think that the free agency for the Bears is dwindling down. I don't think there's too much more that they can or will do. Looking at the free agency, the salary cap, right as it stands right now after all their signings, they've got, and Garza being gone, you've got $11.27 million left over. But then you have to figure in the rookie cap because the NFL says, based on the slots that you draft in, here's how much money you have to draft guys. So the Bears have their rookie salary cap pool is $5.733 million, which is going to leave them with like $5.5 million to play with. So do the Bears go out there and blow it? Possibly. But I don't see anybody else out there that is that valuable. I think the Bears are really done with free agency until the draft, because at this point they're gonna make their draft picks. Then they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna evaluate what they have, where there's holes, who's still available, and then probably plug whatever holes they have left with either moderately priced guys or 1-year contracts. And there's really not that much that's available left that's quality. You got Denarius Moore, the wide receiver from Oakland. He's a free agent still. You've got John Kuhn is the fullback from Green Bay, is still out there. Javier Arenas, the cornerback, is out there. There's just not a lot of guys that are left. I mean, if you want to go by position, you're pretty set at running back. Wide receiver, Michael Crabtree is still out there. Greg Jennings is still out there. Wes Welker's still out there. So maybe if you don't end up, if you're the Bears and you don't draft a wide receiver, maybe you go after one of those and give him a 3-year contract. Jermaine Gresham's out there, tight end. As far as the offensive line, Jake Long is still out there. Justin Blaylock, guys at the end of their careers. Bernard Pollard is out there as safety. Brandon Spikes is still out there as a linebacker. Dwight Freeney still out there as a outside linebacker. Matthias Kiwanuka. So those are guys that are out there that you're not going to give a long contract or big money to. So you sort of evaluate what you get in the draft. I mean, if you end up going and getting Amari Cooper, then you don't go out and spend the money on a Michael Crabtree or Greg Jennings. But if you end up getting a 5th round draft pick as a wide receiver, then maybe you sign one of those guys to bridge you until that 5th round pick is ready to be a starter. If you don't draft an inside linebacker and you're still not comfortable with Bostic or McClellan being your starter, then maybe you do go out and sign Brandon Spikes to play alongside Mason Foster. But at this point, you're not looking for long term. You're looking for plug the gap until you can draft enough guys to fill all your holes. So I don't see the Bears being big players in the free agency until after the NFL draft is over, and then maybe they pick up 1 or 2 more guys, if that. They might just walk into the season with that $5.5 million cap room. So I think that's going to do it for the Chicago Bears. Our talk. We're getting up in the NFL draft, so it's slowing down as far as free agency. But let's move on to baseball, because today is opening day. I don't know if you're listening to this today, but I'm recording this Sunday before the Cubs game. And we've got a lot of things to be optimistic about. If you CSN Chicago did their power rankings for all the MLB teams, and they have Chicago Cubs is 11 and Chicago White Sox is 12. Neither team I don't think is going to be in the hunt for a World Series this year, but I think come September they're still going to be in the talk, and it's going to be until late that they're mathematically eliminated unless they do make the playoffs. So I think both teams have the arrow going up, and the White Sox I think are still closer because some of their talent is right in the prime, whereas the Cubs have Rizzo and Castro just entering the prime, and then you've got a lot of young guys that you're going to have to depend on. With the Cubs, it's you're looking at the window being 2 years from now, maybe next year, and the White Sox, this is the first year of what you have as your window. So while we're at it, let's take a look at the Cubs' finalized 25-man roster. They're going into the season with 3 catchers, which I'm really shocked at. I thought that was just going to be talk and that they were going to try to move somebody. You come in the season with Miguel Montero, who's he's going to be your starter most of the time. David Ross is pretty much the personal catcher for John Lester. And then Wellington Castillo, who is your opening day roster catcher last year. The only thing I can see for this is that David Ross is not going to play very much. He's going to play every 5th day, and that's it. And that's only when you have a healthy guy in John Lester. If John Lester gets hurt, he's not going to put David Ross in. So you carry Wellington Castillo to be the guy that's the primary backup for Montero when he needs a day off. That's the only thing I can see. Everyone called their bluff on carrying him into the season. And so the Cubs went through with it and kept Wellington Castillo because you're not going to send him down to the minors, and you clearly didn't get a good trade offer. Maybe you have to wait until trade deadline when somebody needs a catcher. Infielders. You've got your starter at first base, Anthony Rizzo. That's an obvious choice. He was an all-star last year and one of the better all-around first basemen in the game. Starlin Castro, another starter. Arismendi Alcantara, I think even though he had a little bit of a rough year last year, it was a rookie. He only had half a year, but he's a versatile guy. He can play a lot of different positions. He can play all 3 outfield positions. He can play second. So he's a guy and he's fast. So I feel like he's a guy that Joe Maddon's going to like, and I think he's going to maximize his potential. Mike Olt, third baseman, he's just there as a placeholder until Chris Bryant comes up. Tommy La Stella, he's another guy that he's there for, right opportunity. Made his big league debut last year with the Braves. He's a natural second base, but he's a guy who can play all around. He can work a walk, and he's getting the opportunity to play starting second baseman, starting the opener, because Javier Baez clearly didn't win it, and Arismendi Alcantara didn't win that battle either. Even though Alcantara made it onto the team, Javier Baez got sent down. But La Stella is going to be the starting second baseman for now. And then Jonathan Herrera. The Cubs opted to go with another infielder to complete their bench. Herrera beat out Sweeney for that final spot, and Ryan Sweeney got designated for assignment. So he's a 5-year vet, 30-year-old. Felt he was a better option than Ryan Sweeney, and I can't blame him because Ryan Sweeney was pretty terrible, and you weren't going to get a trade out of him, so he was just wasting a spot, especially when you've got young outfielders coming up. And speaking of outfielders, Jorge Soler is going to be the starting right fielder for opening day. And he's a guy that I'm glad for him, and because he is flying under the radar. Everyone's talking about Javier Baez and Chris Bryant and all this, and Jorge Soler is just going to go up there, and he's going to have not that much pressure. He's going to be able to go up there and clobber the ball, and I think he had a productive year last year for the time that he was up. He had a 903 OPS in 24 games in the majors last year, so that's pretty legitimate. Let's see what he can do without the limelight on him and with all the focus being on Baez and Bryant and such. Then your starting center fielder, Dexter Fowler. Again, he's the guy that they required. He's an on-base machine. He had a .366 on base percentage in 7 seasons. He's got some pop, good speed, and again, you've got a natural leadoff hitter and a natural center fielder, so clear, easy choice. Chris Coghlan was one of your better hitters last year, and he was a former Rookie of the Year, and so still 29 years old. He's a nice fill-in at left field, and he's good for what they are now. You're going to have potentially Bryant playing out there or Albert Almora. You don't want to have somebody that's too good that's going to stifle guys from coming up. Chris Coghlan's good enough to play now, but not so good that if you platoon him or let him sit on the bench, that you're hurting the team. So I think that he's a pretty good pick for right now. Then you got Matt Scherzer. He can play defense in all 3 outfield spots. Pretty athletic. He earned his spot basically by hitting 5 home runs in the Cactus League. And you could say, well, Chris Bryant hit 10 home runs. But Matt Scherzer's not going to cost the Cubs $25 million a season in a couple years. Chris Bryant is. So you get one more year out of Chris Bryant by letting him sit down in Iowa riding a bus for a couple weeks. Now the pitchers, your starters. This has been pretty much a given since camp opened of who your starters were going to be. And sure, there was open competition, but we all knew who was going to win. And it wasn't because other people didn't get the option and the chance. It's because these players were the best options. You got Lester as your number 1, Jake Arrieta as your 2, Jason Hamill 3, Kyle Hendricks 4, and Travis Wood 5. That's your starters, your 5-man rotation. And then your relief pitchers, you've got your your setup man and your closer, and Hector Rondon and Pedro Strop. That's pretty much clear. And then you've got Neil Ramirez, who I think could be the setup man by the end of the year. I really like Neil Ramirez. Came over in, I believe, the Garza trade, but they got him from Texas. But I believe it was the Garza trade. And I like Neil Ramirez a lot. I think he's a quality guy. Phil Koch, he's a guy. He's a lefty, so they have him on the team. Justin Grimm's another guy that made the team. Nothing special. Jason Mott is a guy you went out and got from the Cardinals. He was quality while he was there and had some injuries. So he's a guy that's looking to make an injury recovery. And if he can recover at anything like he was, the Cubs are going to have a hell of a bullpen. Then you've got Edwin Jackson. What can I say about Edwin Jackson? I think he's got like a 6 ERA with the Cubs. He's not good. So, yeah, Edwin Jackson, he's in the bullpen. He couldn't win that 5th starter spot, and I don't know why they just didn't outright him. Eat the salary, send him off, but that's your Cubs 25-man roster. So this is definitely an improved starting rotation for the Chicago Cubs because you added an absolute legitimate number 1, and that's a huge step up by adding a legitimate number 1. And you got rid of Edwin Jackson, which was almost an automatic loss for your team when he took the mound. So by those 2 steps, as addition by subtraction and actual addition, the starting rotation is clearly much better than they were last year. And you're getting Jason Hamill back for the second half of the year, who was great for you guys the first time around. And as far as the bullpen was really good last year, and you're returning for the most part the same guys. Brian Schlitter is not going to be there. He's going to be in Iowa, and Wesley Wright is gone. But other than that, you've got Strop and Rondon and Ramirez, Justin Grimm. You added Jason Mott. That's and Edwin Jackson, if he's pitching poorly I don't think you hesitate to send him down and put him on waivers and bring up Brian Schlitter because you still have him as an option. So then that leaves you with tonight is the first big game of the season it's I think it's a tough spot for the Cubs this first series because you're competing against a team that's most likely going to win your division again. They were a good team last year. They made a really good trade to get Jason Hayward from Atlanta. That was a huge under the radar move, but it was a huge move. St. Louis sees that the Cubs are up and coming, and they for the first time in a long time, they actually are actively looking over their shoulder, but they're still the class of the division and one of the best teams in baseball. And this is a tough opener for the Cubs because all eyes are on the Cubs right now. And regardless of anything, the Cardinals are the better team currently, and they are also the team that's going to be able to not have the pressure of winning tonight and being the better team. So it's a good place for them to be in. John Lester, this is his first game as a Chicago Cub, starting on opening day against Adam Wainwright. You've got the young guys. This is going to be a tough matchup for the Cubs and a tough series because if you are able to win this, man, that's great. That is a great springboard because you've automatically gained ground on the Cardinals and you'll be ahead of them in the standings for the first time probably in 10 years. But it's also a huge confidence builder if you go out there and say, we're throwing down the gauntlet. We may not win the division this year, but guess what? Guess what, Cardinals? Is we're here and we can beat you. But if they lose, with all these young guys on the team, you just don't want to see them get bogged down by that. So this is a tough matchup for the Cubs opening night. So we'll see what happens, and we'll be talking more about that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Blackhawks. Again, like I said, 1 week we're like, what the hell are they doing? And the next week we're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. We've got the Blackhawks where they have a tough schedule going up. They were closer to being out of the playoffs than they were to being in first place. And they beat the Rangers. They beat the Canucks. They beat the Winnipeg Jets. And then they have a miraculous come-from-behind win against the Buffalo Sabres, which is just a miracle play with our play by Jonathan Taves to win that game. 2 goals in 45 seconds or whatever it was. It was absolutely astounding. So you have them come from behind, and suddenly the Blackhawks went from being closer to being out of the playoffs than they were in first place to they're a lock. They're already in the playoffs. It's guaranteed. And they've played one less game than Nashville, who's in first, and they're only 2 points behind them. So they could legitimately win the division. And the wild card, the last wild card spot is 92 points. So they're 10 points. So in 4 games, they can't be. So they're 6 points up on the better wild card team, which is in their division, and there's only 8 points possible left. So it's almost impossible for them to not be a top 3, and what it is you're getting better play. The guys are stepping up. You're getting better goalie play. You've changed up the defensive pairings, like I was saying you do. You put Oduya back with Hjalmarsson, and that's a rock solid pair. But you're still, the weak point is you've got Michael Roosevelt. I think I can sum it up best by, I saw a meme where somebody took the picture from the movie Weekend at Bernie's, where the 2 guys were propping up a dead guy and pretending he was still alive. And it had, I think it was Seabrook and Keith, and they had Michael Roosevelt was the dead guy, and it said Weekend at Rosie's, and they were propping him up. And that's kind of what it is Michael Roosevelt is just not playing well. And I feel bad because he's a good competitor, and he's had a good career, and he's done well for us in the past, but he's just not a guy right now. And it's a crappy position to be in because who else do you put in there? I mean, you've got Hjalmarsson out there, you've got Keith, you've got Oduya, you've got Seabrook, and and you've got Kimmo Timonen. So your choices are you play David Rundblad or Michael Roosevelt, and neither one of those is a very good option. I don't like David Rundblad. I don't think he's a very good player. But Michael Roosevelt is 36 years old, and he's not playing well. And it's really frustrating because Coach Q is so hell-bent on playing his guys that he's going to just keep propping those guys out there. So looking at the pairings for tonight's game against St. Louis is you've got Keemanen and Seabrook, Keith and Roosevelt, and what he's doing is he's putting his guy, Michael Roosevelt, out there, and he's going to ridiculously put him out there to be embarrassing, and he's going to try to put him with Duncan Keith for Keith to prop him up. And then your last pairing of Oduya Chalmerson. And it's embarrassing is why, if you want to go far in the playoffs, you need to put a really good defensive pairing out there to take away that team's first line. And that's Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook. Is you put those two guys out there and you don't put Roosevelt out there. And I kept hoping, beyond hope, is that we'd have a return of Trevor Van Riemsdyk, because then you could put him in there and you've got Timonen, who hasn't been great, but he's at least a solid guy. And you put him back in there. You could put Keemanen and TVR, Keith back with Seabrook, and Oduya with Chalmerson. And you've instantly upgraded your defense. But TVR was coming back from that broken patella, doing a stint in Rockford, and he hurt his wrist the other night and had to have surgery. He's out 8 weeks. So he's going to return around the same time or after Patrick Kane. So that's not a good sign for the Blackhawks in getting TVR back. You're kind of going to have to go with what you have right now. And that's not good for your defensive pairings. I don't know what else to say. Is they've got what they've got, and that's what they're playing. You had Tim Erickson, who I thought was playing decent, at least on the same level as David Rundblad, and he wasn't a Coach Q guy, so he had to go, and you end up putting him on waivers, and he goes to Toronto, and now you're stuck with Rundblad and Roosevelt. So looking at our top four lines, first line, Taves, Versteeg, Hossa. Second line tonight is going to be Richards, Vermette, Sharp. Third line, Shaw, Saad, Bickle. Fourth line, Kruger, Teravainen, and Desjardins. And looking at these lines again tonight, it's frustrating because you brought Antoine Vermette over in a trade to be a center. He was a guy who could be your second line center that you need desperately. He's as good as Taves on the faceoffs. And he's a guy that you can put in on the power play or the penalty kill, and he could be that center for you and play really well in there. And that's what he was known for, and that's what you brought him over for. So instead, what does Coach Q do? He moves him to the right wing position on the second line, so he's not playing center, and he doesn't put him in on penalty kills or power plays. So it just makes you scratch your head, is what was the point of trading for this guy if you're not going to play him for what he is? And that's just so frustrating. And I think the Hawks are playing really well. They're finally playing some playoff style hockey, but this is a really tough year this year for the Blackhawks. I mean, you've got some really steep competition, some stiff competition here with Anaheim, Nashville, St. Louis. This is any one of these teams that are in the playoffs right now, except maybe Vancouver and Calgary. I think they're a team that could easily go on, or not easily, they could go on and play in the Stanley Cup final. I think they're 6 teams deep. Los Angeles won last year, and they're the second wild card team, the 8th seed. And so you know that they're absolutely capable of going out and beating everybody, because they, as good as the Blackhawks were last year, the LA Kings were the best team in hockey. and by a nose, because they beat the Blackhawks in 7, and whoever won that game was the best team in hockey. Minnesota has just been playing lights out. One thing they were missing is a goalie. They're getting great goalie play. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10, and they were nipping at the Blackhawks' heels. If they would have had that goalie, if they would have had great goalie play all year long, they probably are ahead of the Blackhawks. Blackhawks, they were Vegas odds as favorites for the NHL Stanley Cup. St. Louis has played great all year. Nashville was a preseason contender for the Stanley Cup Finals, and they're going to win the division probably. And they are a team that's still in the hunt for the President's Cup. Anaheim is got 107 points. They are the best team in the Western Conference. So there's a lot of competition the Blackhawks are playing. They can't coast through the first round this year. Last year I felt, even though the Wild and the Blues were good, I felt that the Blackhawks were so much superior to those two teams that they kind of coasted through, and they really didn't have any competition until they played the Kings in the conference finals. And that's not going to be the case this year, because as it stands right now, they're going to play St. Louis in the first round if it were to end today. And we'll see tonight, but St. Louis is a really tough team. And they could, the way it stands, is they're either going to play St. Louis, Nashville, or Minnesota in the first round. And none of those are very good first-round matchups. It's not a good round or not a good way to start the playoffs. So the Hawks need to get everything, get the gears greased and be ready to play playoff-style hockey. And I think part of that is getting Vermette back to center, because that's what he is, and that's what you're going to need him to be. You can't rely on Brad Richards. If you want to put Brad Richards at center, put him in a third-line center. See where you go from there. You got Teravainen playing well. You've got Desjardins, who was a kind of a pick or a trade that went under the radar, but he's been playing great. He's got some big hits. He's shots on goal. He's playing well. Physical presence. But we've got the Hawks. They're playing well, but they're going to need to play better if they're going to win the Stanley Cup Final. They're going to have to cut down on some of these odd man rushes that they're giving up. They can't give up so many A+ chances to Corey Crawford, as Eddie O would say, the A+ chances. You can't keep giving those up and expecting Crawford to stand on his head every night. And I know you have to have a goalie stand on his head for 16 wins if you're going to win the Stanley Cup Finals, but you got to make it a little bit easier for him. And I guess that's really all about the Hawks. I think we're going to wrap it up with that. Thanks for listening. And like I said, if you have any kind of comments, concerns, definitely hit me up. You can reach us. The website is swerskisports.com, Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. You get up with us on any of those, I definitely will hit you back. We'll talk about your question on the air. And also make sure you're checking out our sponsors. The Ice Hogs are ending up their season. They're only 90 minutes away. It's a lot of fun. My daughter is about to turn 6 months in less than 2 weeks, and she loves going to the games. I put her headphones on so it's not so loud, like her earphones, so it's not so loud for her, but she loves watching hockey, just like her dad, and she watches the play back and forth. It's only 90 minutes from the city limits. It's super cheap, a lot of fun. So they're winding up the season soon. So definitely check them out at icehogs.com. Also, you get to see guys that you're going to see in the major or the pro level in the majors in the next coming years. So see them early. And also get a free audiobook. Audible.com/Swerski Sports. Get a free audiobook. You get one on the Bulls, the Bears, the Blackhawks, or even if you're not into one of those, there's 100,000 titles you can check out. Definitely go there and help, because when you go there, it supports the show. So even if you don't want the free book, sign it up and get it for a friend. It helps support the show. It's keeps us on the air. And then thanks again for listening. Keep checking us out. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.